I realized like, oh, I am not alone. There is a whole lot of other people that have gone through this. Like, y'all, there's 8 billion people on this planet. You're not alone. And I say that with so much love and compassion for what everybody's individual experience is, right? Like, I've never lived your life, you never lived mine, right? But there's certain things that we have in common that we can relate with. And that's where the like, you're not alone comes from.
Hello, my bis and allies. It's Talia Cass here with Bisexual Behavior. This month is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I really wanted to do a special episode that talks specifically about the links between bisexuality and mental health. Mental health awareness is something that's super important to me. I'm not personally an expert on this topic, but it is something that I've experienced and I feel very passionate about. So I was really excited to bring on a listener named Soarsha to talk about, again, mental health and her journey with getting diagnosed with ADHD, which, as a lot of you know, getting diagnosed can be really challenging. So I thought it was a really interesting discussion. We also talk about combating bi misconceptions in her marriage, which I think is really, really relatable. A lot of us in hetero relationships that oftentimes we're kind of working together with our partners to combat biphobia and work through stereotypes. So I thought that was a really interesting topic. And we also mentioned, the ways that we cope with our own mental health issues and how we kind of work through our own depression and anxieties. So again, I think this is a really important topic because as bisexuals, we're at a higher risk for a lot of mental health conditions. So whether that be depression, anxiety, ADHD, OCD, all of those things, are a lot more prevalent in the bisexual community, and we talk a lot more about that. I also pulled some stats to talk more specifically about those links between being bisexual and experiencing challenges with mental health, to give a little bit more context. So stay tuned for the end of the episode to get a little bit more information on that. And again, I do want to have a content warning out there. We talk through a lot of different mental health conditions that affect us personally, but we tried really hard not to talk about anything that's too triggering. So I think this episode is more of a general conversation about mental health. I think you should be okay, but, take care of yourself. If you feel like this is something that could be harmful to you, then, listen to the many other episodes that I have. But, and I hopefully, it will be something that's relatable to all of you. But without further ado, here's Soarsha. Hello, Soarsha. Welcome to Bisexual Behavior.
How are you, Talia Cass?
I'm doing great, having an okay day. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited to have you because you're a listener who reached out. You heard the episode, Leaf Bloomer Bisexual, and you had a story that you wanted to tell as well. And I thought it was perfect for Mental Health Awareness Month if we talk about kind of what we've both gone through, and, just talk about your journey. I think it was really interesting to talk to you before. So I'm excited to share it with listeners. But yeah, tell me, who are you? We usually start with introductions, so you can follow my format. I'm Talia. My pronouns are she, her. I'm bisexual, cis, and white. What about you?
Yeah, I'm Soarsha. I'm bisexual, cis, white, she, her pronouns. I think I covered all the bases. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on, by the way.
Oh my gosh, thank you for coming on and reaching out. It's just like such a pleasure to build a fun bisexual community and talk to other people. So Soarsha, what I always love to start out with, sometimes I don't bring this up until 20 minutes into the interview, so I'm glad that I'm on top of my game today. What is your most bisexual behavior?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I have been thinking about this for since our initial phone call that we had. I was like, what do I say? Even since listening to the other podcasts that I've listened to that you put out, and whatever your other guests have done theirs, I've loved it and it really enjoyed listening to it. So I've been like, what would I say? Okay, so this is what I had come up with. And it was the first thought I had, and I kept revisiting it. So I was like, I'm just going to say it. But my most bisexual behavior is, especially when I was first coming out, anytime I would question my bisexuality, I would I would picture Velma from the live action Scooby-Doo when she like comes down the staircase in like the red latex jumpsuit and then be like, yeah, no, I'm very gay. Like, I'm very bi. Like,
We all have one of those.
Reason. Right? And like that scene for me is like, I don't know, that triggered something. That awoke something for me as a kid. I feel like that was the start of it.
Do you want to know what my bisexual awakening was as a kid?
Yes.
So I think I'm a little bit older than you, but when I was in high school, I was obsessed with the OC. And so I was really into Olivia Wilde's character. She played a bisexual woman on the OC, and she dated like the main character, Misha Barton, and they were just like in their glory in the 2000s, like making out on screen. And I was like, wow, I would think I like told my friends that I had a crush on Olivia Wilde, and like it was fine. It was just a casual crush, not at all gay.
Yeah.
Just
right.
You know.
And like I love the backpedaling that's done, especially when you're like not out even to yourself of just like I mean I have this girl crush on her, but like it's just because I appreciate her as a woman or like some other weird justification, right? Because you can't just like you can't just air quotes come out and be like, oh, I have this crush on her, right? Like yeah, totally can relate.
Yeah. You have to be like, wow, I think she's so hot, but I like totally want to be her. It's not at all that I want to kiss her.
Yes, totally.
Totally. So tell me a little bit about your like bi awakening in general. I think you mentioned that you felt like you kind of came out later in life as well. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I totally related to your episode with Andrew, that late bloomer episode. I mean, it's exactly what you said in the beginning, why I reached out to you in the first place. Like, I felt like I came out later in life, but then after hearing Andrew's story of him coming out like in his 50s, I believe is what he said, I was like, maybe I didn't come out that late. Like, it's all about perspective. Anyways, but yeah, so a bit of my story. So I didn't come out until after I was married. So my husband was actually very integral in like helping me come out. And there was certain instances when we were like being intimate and stuff where certain things would come up or I would suggest something or whatever. And he would kind of like clock certain gay things. And he'd be like, honey, like, do you like girls? Like, are you bi? And I was like, no. Like, no. Because there's just like so much like internalized. Yeah, no. Like, and there was so much internalized homophobia and misogyny and all of that I just very deeply had pushed down all those feelings. And eventually just came to a head and he kind of just like flat out asked me, or more so it's just like, if you're bisexual, I'm still gonna love you. Like, it doesn't matter. I want you to like be you, like, and I want you to like express that. And like, like he really sat me down and was like, it's okay. Like he really had to like lay that foundation for me to feel like safe, like coming out. And then once that was like peeled back and I had that truly safe space, I was like, it just, the floodgates opened and it all just came pouring out.
Wow. How interesting, though, because I feel like when you do, like, from what I've heard from people who are in a relationship or married when they come out, it's more of a self-discovery and then something that they have to slowly, like, warm up to tell their partners. So I've never heard of it, whereas the partner identified it before the individual. So that's so interesting. And it's like, you must have felt, like you mentioned, it was like a safe space, but like, it must have made it so much easier for you to, like, accept it for yourself, you know?
Yes, like there was aspects of it that were very validating because it wasn't, I mean, don't get me wrong, there was plenty of healthy questioning and like I said, lots of internalized homophobia and misogyny that like affected me truly accepting everything, but those early days of it was very like just so comforting to just immediately know, to not have that burden that I've heard other people talk about of like exactly what you said, like, oh my gosh, how do I tell my husband or how do I tell my boyfriend or like da 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 da. Like that part of it was great, but on the other side of it, it was also limiting because then it, especially being married, was immediately the conversations of like, well, do you want to like act on these things? Do you want to like explore with other people? Da 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 da. And I was like, no, like I don't. Like I really don't. Like I really just want to be with you. But yeah, but then it was like hard too because as much as my husband has had like clocked it in me, so to speak, there's also been things that he's had to work through as well. Stereotypes, misconceptions, not like understanding things fully
Right.
that were sometimes limiting at the beginning. And I'm sure my husband will listen to this like once this is out, so I don't want to like at him too hard, but like there were certain things that like offhanded comments that he had said, like one-offs that kind of like hurt or didn't sit right, and so like that was hard. And I mean, I've been out to him for maybe since like we got married-ish, around then, so like 3 years, so we've worked through a lot of it. He's grown a lot. We love the like the have you seen the TikTok where it's like it's like this girl, she's like talking kind of funny and she's like, "Hi, I'm blah blah blah. I'm part of the LGBT community and this is my friend Valentina. She's an ally. Say something." And then like the girl is just like, "Ally!" Like she just says it.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
do you know what I'm talking about? Yes. So oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I should like insert that TikTok into the podcast. But yeah, so we joke all the time that he's like my little ally. Like he's like he has bi-wife energy, all of it. So he's grown
Amazing.
a lot. Yeah, so he's grown a lot. But I guess the point of me trying to explain that is just to say that like it wasn't always like sunshine and roses. It was a unique thing to have him kind of clock that and help bring it out, but it wasn't all like, wow, I had this perfect husband who just like everything was great. Like it definitely was not.
So what kinds of ways did you work through those, things that you talked about? Like, I know in the past, I've had guests that talk about how they did couples counseling and different
Mhm.
things, but like, what do you think worked for you and your partner?
Yeah, I think for the two of us, what helped a lot is um I went to therapy for a lot of other things. Like I was in therapy, and so I think there was a lot of things I was bringing home from therapy that my therapist at the time, or my therapist rather, that helped me really accept and like accept this part of myself. The therapist that really helped me like fully accept it was really fantastic at helping breaking down stereotypes or taking down walls or rejecting like the misogyny or like the homophobia, like the internalized homophobia rather. And as I was breaking down those pieces, essentially it was like bringing that therapy and that those changes home. And like in a sense you could call it like policing like my husband, to use that term, but like if he was like saying something that like wasn't cool or like wasn't like ooh that like reinforces this, I would try my best to like clock it, and if it was appropriate, kind of stop him in that moment and be like, hey, it's not cool to say those things because one, it hurts my feelings, or it's like insensitive, or this, that, or the other thing, and like have like a full conversation about it. Or again, obviously life's life. Like I'm sure there was times we were out and about and I had to like revisit it when we got home kind of thing and be like, hey, we shouldn't really say that. Or
Right.
like, let's not do that. Or just, yeah. So it was a lot of like, as I broke down those walls and those negative belief systems and I started to accept them, I brought that work back to him and helped dismantle the negative belief systems in him as well. Um, so that was really helpful. And I think another thing for me was the internet, which is great because it's so accessible, but can be
For
lonely
sure.
at times. Like I've really struggled feeling like I'm a part of the like LGBTQ plus community in a physical sense, where like
Right.
physically have that community. I have some friends who are in the community as well, but they physically live like far away. So I don't have that like closeness. So that sucked. There's no easy way to say that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of bisexual people struggle because they feel like they don't have that community. I mean, like, even a lot of the bisexual people I know, they still, like, kind of identify as straight in a way, or they're, like, fully immersed in the queer community where, like, they they might not even relate to some things that other bisexual people relate to.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because like bisexuality is so vast and there's so many different intersectionalities that people have that makes it so they might have a completely different experience than like what you or I would have. And I think that's why like, so something, I feel like I'm going off on a tangent, but like one thing I think about a lot is like the stats, the stats of like showing that bisexual people have like the highest rates of like mental illness, suicide attempts, or like sexual assault. And I'm like, it can't just be because of biphobia that makes, because I feel like there's certain things that other like lesbian or gay people go through that could be more severe, but I think it has a lot to do with like it's just such a wide range that like some people might be experiencing something so much worse than other people. But that's why I feel like it's so helpful to have a community, because like then you can understand what somebody else's bisexual experience would look like, you know. But I think what you're saying is like so relatable, because it's just like, how do you find other people like you or that can relate to a certain part of you? And it's just, yeah, that's the challenge for sure.
Yeah, it really was. And like, I came out end of 2019-ish, beginning of 2020. So like COVID time. So there weren't the physical opportunities to like, let's go to a pride parade or like, let's go out and about. Right. It was very much like everything shut down physically. So as I'm personally having this like expanse of like, I'm coming out. It was like, stay inside, like don't go anywhere. So, I mean, and not to blame everything on COVID, I'm sure I could have found ways to connect remotely with people. I mean, like, look at what we're doing now, right? Like, but I just really struggled with it. And I wonder if maybe my journey could have been different if I had that community earlier on. And again, that's not to say that like I don't have queer friends who I absolutely adore and we have good conversations with, but there's just something about like getting together with your friends, having a glass of wine, and like just being together, like the physical act of just like sharing space is so special. And I haven't had that with like my queer friends a lot. And that was definitely hard
so
during
tough.
COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I came out right before COVID started too, so I can totally relate. Literally the only way that I like built some kind of community, it wasn't even building a community, it was just like meeting other queer people, was just being on dating apps. So like being married, like I can't even imagine there was no way for you to like even find anyone. Like there was Reddit maybe, or like podcasts, but I mean, thank God for that, at least. That got me through some times as well. So, but Soarsha, one thing you were talking a lot about is your therapist and how they helped you break down a lot of things that were kind of in your head.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they were like really understood what you were going through. And I'm curious, like, is this the first therapist you had? Did you find that it was hard to find someone who could relate to you? Because I mean, for me, it was I took someone in a really like crucial moment and they were helpful at the time being, but as my sexuality evolved, I felt like I couldn't like relate to them anymore. So I'm just like really curious about your, you know, journey with therapy specifically.
Thank you for this question. This is like, yeah, this is what I love to talk about. I'm super passionate about this. And so, yeah, let me just dive right in. So I have had 4 different therapists, which sounds like a lot. It is. And my last one was actually my favorite one. Sorry to have favorites, but she was the one that really helped me dive into a lot of things and tease a lot of things out and get me to a really great place. And so I 100% off the bat will say that talk therapy may not be for every single individual out there, but I think it works for a lot of people and it has the ability to work for a lot of people. What's really tricky about talk therapy is it's so personal that it's difficult to find the right match. And it's difficult, exactly like what you said, Talia, of like, oh, this person was great. And then they kind of weren't great or like they didn't fit. And the hard part about that is like having the courage, the energy, the bravery to like, okay, I need to set this relationship down and like go to a different therapeutic relationship. That's so hard when you've opened yourself up. You've been so vulnerable and you've like
Right.
poured your soul out to somebody. or parts of your soul out to somebody, and then it's like I have to restart because everything you poured out is a context for who you are, why you are the way you are. And so to restart that with a brand new therapist is so challenging. I find like friends and stuff that I've talked to, like when they stop going to therapy, it's kind of what you're saying. The therapist wasn't serving them anymore for that life stage or that situation. And they didn't, it was the exasperation of like, I don't want to find a different therapist. Like I just don't have the energy. It's too much. And so they stop. And it's so hard. And like having started over 4 different times. And I kind of want to defend myself. I feel like that's like bad, but it's like not. My first therapist actually I think got cancer. And so she stopped practicing, which is super sad. And then my second therapist was just not good. They were like a free counselor at the college I was going to, and the person I was seeing just was not a good fit for me. I feel like that's a polite way to say it. It was not a good fit for me. And I remember leaving their sessions multiple times crying, and not in like the, oh my God, I just had the best therapy session ever and like crying, but like that I feel worse coming out than going in. And I remember calling my mom and being like, this is happening. Like, and she was like, Soarsha, just stop. Just don't go to that person anymore. You need to not. And I was like, okay. So then number 3 was in my home. Like I'm originally from Chicago, was in Chicago, and she was wonderful, but my husband and I just happened to move to Texas, so I had to stop seeing her because there's no laws in the US that like make therapy I don't know how to explain it. Like, I want to say like interstate travel, but that's not the right term. But like national, that's the word I want. To make it national, which I don't understand how like BetterHelp and all that stuff works, because when I got to Texas and I found my therapist that I absolutely love, she was I was traveling a little bit, and I was like, oh, well, we can just do our like sessions virtually. I'll just be in like California or whatever. And she's like, no, I can't see you if you're out of state. And I was like, what? And I started thinking about like, how do all these virtual therapists work? Do they just ignore the law or like whatever?
I heard that there's some like fishy ethics to it. So I'm not really sure. I haven't done a ton of research, but yeah, I don't know. I've like held off because like I've heard that they keep your data, which is like kind of creepy because it's your therapist, but also like I don't know how they treat the doctors. Like I don't know how all of that works. So I just I should definitely do some more research on it. But I've heard and they're also sponsor every single podcast I listen to. So I'm like, also if you want to sponsor me, I'll just shut up. Just kidding.
Right. And it's one of those things where it's like sometimes accessibility, like I think it can be the right service for people 100%, but for someone who's done a lot of in-person therapy and has spoken with like the last therapist I was with, and her explaining like what how it works like on the back end a little bit, I was like, I don't know how these things work. They must have something figured out. Anyways, that's a huge tangent. Oh my gosh, so sorry.
No, that's what podcasting is about. So
yeah, just all the tangents. So yeah, then the person I found in Texas was absolutely fantastic, and I connected with her so much, and she helped me work through a lot of things with so like a lot of other, like you mentioned before, bisexual people tend to have like a high rate of all sorts of mental health issues and illnesses. And I am
like across the board. It's like kind of crazy that I was like looking at the stats, and they like specifically bisexual women. I think bisexual men come in second for everything, but like bisexual women are like the highest percent of literally everything. It's like it's wild. But
and I bet the bisexual men might be just as much or higher. I'm sure there's an issue of underreporting or non-reporting from men already, because I know there's like an issue of like just reporting in general, regardless of like sexual expression, you know? I don't know those numbers, I'm just assuming. But yeah, no, totally right. And so I'm very much like a lot of other bisexual women where I have the whole alphabet soup of disorders, right? I got to the depression, and I see, anxiety, all that.
And you see like TikToks where they're like, I'm queer, but that also means I'm neurodivergent or whatever. And it's like, that's so, I feel like I'm seeing so many TikToks telling me that I have, I don't know, ADHD or OCD, but I should probably get tested for something. But it's like, I feel like every queer person I talk to, they have like a whole soup of just different things that they've like, that they're struggling with or that they're, you know, they just have. And it's just, you know, It's what makes all of our experiences similar but very different at the same time, you know?
Absolutely. And I'm curious too if part of those issues or being divergent, whether that's physically divergent or neurodivergent from like the typical culture, has to do with like our sexual orientation, but like and not fitting into like the primary culture, right? If this is like how we're
Right.
supposed to be, and then we know we're the other groups, I wonder if knowing we're the other contributes to the decline in mental health. It could, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I don't know, but like that would make sense to me, right? Like
I
if we're
mean,
always on the
yeah,
outside.
they say that most people with anxiety also get depression, so it's kind of like I feel like a lot of those things might go hand in hand of like the feeling of otherness, but also like I heard one person talking about how I don't necessarily agree with this, but they were talking about how ADHD is kind of like not that it's not a real thing, but it's also just like it's normal. It's just capitalism and just society has trained us that you have to be productive and function in these ways to be a
Yeah.
normal or like qualified person. And so it makes like people with ADHD feel like there's some kind of whole other label, which I feel like that kind of resonates in like a queer way somehow. Like it's kind of like the same thing with being queer and not like necessarily fitting into the straight culture, but then you're also not all the way far into just like full,
The
you know,
full on.
gay culture. So it's kind of like, so I don't know. I think there's some similarities there.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, in my little alphabet soup of disorders is ADHD. So yeah, I have anxiety, depression, PTSD, ADHD, and then disordered eating, habits and things that are not great. So, which is different than an eating disorder. It's like step down.
So eating disorders is something that I like have struggled with as well, and I find that like a lot of times they'll prescribe that because it's like most people have like a combination of different types of eating disorders and they all have different phases and like things, so it's like
Yeah, no,
it's kind
completely.
of like
Like, I
an
mean,
umbrella
that's a
term in a
realm.
way.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a beautiful way to say it. I think umbrella term is excellent. Thank you for taking the words out of my mouth. That's much better way to say it. But oh my gosh, you had said something that was just so good, and I wanted to build off of it. Oh, regarding ADHD. Okay, so I got diagnosed with ADHD in 2021, and that experience was really frustrating as a woman and as a woman with ADHD. It's both those things because I had gone. So I'm going to try and speed up the story a little bit. Basically, me and my therapist together, I had come in and was like, hey, like I'm like noticing these things, blah, blah, blah. She started noticing like things of ADHD with me. And then her and I kind of did like went through the DSM-5 in our session and kind of like she asked me like all the diagnostic questions basically of like, did you do this as a kid or was blah blah blah, like all of that. If you've been in a diagnostic session, you probably know what I'm talking about. And I met like a lot of the criteria, but she wasn't able to like prescribe me medication or do anything like that, so I had to go to a different doctor. Oh my gosh, this is too long. Anyways, so basically I say that it wasn't just me going into a psychiatrist and being like, I have ADHD, diagnose me. But like another mental health professional had like seen it, was like, yep, pretty sure you have ADHD. You should go to a psychiatrist and like get diagnosed. So I find a psychiatrist who I actually really enjoyed, loved working with her. But my initial experience is really frustrating because I went in and I was like, hey, I have been working with this therapist and we're pretty sure that I might have ADHD. Can you please screen me for that? And she's like, okay, yeah. And she starts screening me. And of course, as a good psychiatrist, she screens me for like across the board, right? She doesn't just screen me for one thing. But all she screened me for in that first session related to ADHD was she asked, did you have good grades or not? And I was like, yeah, I had good grades. But it was like so frustrating because any woman with ADHD and who is diagnosed late in life will resonate with why that's so infuriating, is because ADHD markers are different in women than they are in men. A classic thing for young boys or men is to have bad grades. That is not common for women with ADHD. Most women with ADHD have inattentive ADHD, which allows them, like, they'll still have good grades basically. And it was like a female psychiatrist who was like giving me this diagnostic tests. And so I was like so frustrated that I was like, you're a woman. You should understand that women are different from men and be screening me appropriately for it, not ask me this like men-centered question that like wouldn't necessarily diagnose like is known to not be effective for women. But yeah, so she was like screening me for all these different disorders. And I was like, just remember walking out of that meeting so pissed because I was like, I came in, I told you what I'm pretty sure is wrong with me. You know, I'm a woman, like female presenting. And then you asked me like a sexist question basically. And they were like, no, you don't have it. And I was like, God, I was so mad. And then I kept seeing her a couple months. And then I was like, hey, can I get rescreened again, please? And then she rescreens me and she's like, yes, so you screen positive for inattentive and hyperactive. And I was like, oh, so not just one kind, but both of the kinds of ADHD. And I was like, what?
They also think that like women can't feel like labor pains as significantly, or like like women of color, they don't actually like feel pain, so they wouldn't give them like treatment when they're giving birth and stuff like that. Like obviously doctors know a lot because they get the education, but I feel like those biases like just really affect the work that they do, and it's very obvious.
100%. Like it totally does. And it's really frustrating because like I said, I went on to have a great relationship with my psychiatrist, but that first meeting I was like, girl, what the heck? Like, come on. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating.
It's so tough when a doctor kind of ignores something that you're struggling with. So I can definitely relate to that. But it's so funny because the psychiatrist I was seeing, she was like trying to get me to do an ADHD test. And then I was telling her, I'm like, I don't know if I feel like I shouldn't have an Adderall prescription because I've done it for fun. And I just think that I liked it too much, and I just like don't think I need a prescription because that would just mess with me a little bit. But she was like, no, it's fine. Like I felt like she was like more very pushy on like prescribing.
Interesting.
Yeah, prescribing things. So it was like really interesting. But I stopped seeing her because also she would talk about her like personal life a lot and like her daughter a lot. So it was interesting. I've had another therapist I liked a little bit better, but I remember when I first started seeing her, she told me that she was going to be very harsh with me and that I need to tell her like what my boundaries are. So if she's being harsh on me and it's hurting my feelings, I should say something, which is something that I have trouble doing. I have trouble like communicating my boundaries, like, or at least I used to. And so I remember, I feel like I'm going off on a tangent now, but I was terrified to meet with her because of it. And it turns out that it was not a problem at all. She was very nice. Like she was actually like really validating of my feelings. But when I started to come out, she thought that I was a lesbian the whole time because I have like past sexual trauma, which like was affecting my relationships and certain things in a way. And I think she like saw it as, well, you're probably just gay because you have these feelings for women too. So it's just like interesting how like, and I don't mean to like bash her because she helped me a lot, but when it came to like my sexuality, it was like, I don't know. It's not that at the time I was like, oh, maybe I am like full lesbian, you know, but I just think that wasn't necessarily a helpful thing to say, especially when she knew that I had like past sexual trauma and that clearly was affecting my like sex life at the time. So it's just interesting how finding the right therapist is really important. But at the same time, it's also like, if you're not in a good mental health state, are you going to put in the effort to look for that therapist?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Like I stopped going to therapy at a certain point because it was a pain in the ass to schedule appointments. I would like call them and they wouldn't respond. And like, so I don't know how much they expect people to do. So, and then the other thing is that like, I don't know, like it depends of course on your health insurance, but like, holy shit, is it expensive, at least for my insurance, to go see a therapist. I've had, insurance where it was like free, but like that is a privilege. That is not the case for everyone in this country, unfortunately. So it's just like, I think a lot about, how privileged it is to have like a really good therapist, and it's like sucks that not everyone has that.
Yes. Gazillion times yes. If I could just put you on repeat, like yes, I agree with everything you just said. Totally. It is such a privilege to have a good therapist, and after going through my 4 and ending with like a fantastic one, it opens your eyes. It's like, oh my god, that was not good. Like all the other ones before, right? And like, oh, it was such a privilege. And I I've talked to a lot of people who've gone to therapy, and when it's negative feedback, when they're like, oh, it just didn't work for me, or I didn't like my therapist, or it was really difficult to schedule, it's so heartbreaking, because having seen somebody who really helped me heal trauma, accept myself and my bisexuality, dismantle like internalized homophobia, misogyny, all of that, and like get to this place where I'm at now, and I'm like, oh, I could like sing from the rooftops, right? And like I know that's possible. And then like other people just have a bad experience, and then like that's all that's keeping them from having the good experience.
So, for our listeners who maybe don't have, a good therapy situation, like what other ways would you recommend them to kind of like work through different things that they may be struggling with?
Yeah, so I think oh my gosh. I'm if you're listening to this, you guys can know I talk a lot, obviously, already. I'm going to try to be succinct. Okay. Okay, so for depression, if it's a depression issue that you're struggling with, simple things that you can do if you don't have a therapist is write on a piece of paper, hang up on your wall, like the 5 to 10 things, no more than 10, that you need to do to prevent like sliding into suicidal ideation, or like a spiral, like a depression spiral. And like those simple things can keep you out of crisis, right? Like if I'm talking to people who are like on the edge of crisis right now, right, and they're not able to get into therapy, write those on a wall. I remember doing this in college when I was really in crisis, and I didn't have my therapist, my third therapist yet, and I was like in a really bad place, and I had just written down, oh no, I misremembered that. I had my therapist in Chicago, but because I was at school, I couldn't see her regularly. So when I left for school, I wasn't seeing her. That's what I was thinking of. When I left for college, she had said, like, write down these 5 things. This is what she told me. And it was like basic. And if you have depression, you'll relate. Take a shower, sleep for at least 7 hours, like eat something, drink water, like those essential basics. Call somebody you love. Take a walk outside, or like move your body, right? Like super simple things. But when you're in that crisis state of depression, it feels like I don't know if you can relate to that, just feeling of like,
oh yeah,
you can't do any of, like, taking a shower is the biggest task of the day, or like feeling so lonely, but then not being able to pick up the phone and call somebody because you don't know what to say and you don't know how to explain to them, or for me, it was like I felt so burdened by what I was going through, and I didn't want to put that burden on anybody else. Burden is a common word that comes up with depression for me, I find. It's like that feeling of burden.
Same.
Of being a burden.
Yeah.
But that's what I would say. Like, if you can't get into a therapist and you're really struggling with depression, try to hit those things on that list every single day. And that might help you stay out of a crisis spiral. But another thing, especially with depression, because that's what I'm really passionate about, because that's a frustrating disorder, because you can like, it's like one of the few mental illnesses that has a self-destruct button, right? Like,
yeah.
And so I'm very passionate about that one. But another one with depression would be know your circles of people. So and when I was really going through it, my boyfriend at the time, now husband, was in my inner circle. So if I was having like a really hard day, my therapist told me, okay, like call him or text him. So that was like my immediate circles, like my boyfriend, my sister, my best friend. Best friends were in here. And then it was like my friends at school who are kind of more on the outside zone, and then like whatever, right? Like your circles got bigger, friendships. I don't know if you've seen those diagrams. Have you seen those before?
Yeah, I've seen those.
Okay, yeah. So like that was something that was brought up to me as like depression is going to try to tell you that like no one loves you, you're alone, no one, like you don't matter, right? Like when you're in that state, those are the thoughts. And so as much as you can, break those thoughts, because that's really what CBT is, cognitive behavioral therapy, is all about interrupting the negative thought and replacing it with a more positive behavior, action, belief, and like switching out the neurological paths in your brain for the bad one. Take the bad one out, put a new path in, right? you can do that on your own.
Right.
You don't need to be in therapy. Therapy is great because it helps you see your blind spots. It helps you like
For sure.
see you can't see for yourself. But if you can't get there, like try to find ways to intercept those negative thoughts and replace them with positive ones. If your brain is telling you you're worthless, be like, nope, you know, I'm my mother's daughter and she loves me for being her daughter, or, you know, my boyfriend loves me as his girlfriend. Because for me, and I don't know if other people can relate to this, my self-worth was so low that I never believed, like my therapist would try to get me to say stuff like, I am worthy and I love myself. And I couldn't say that seriously because I wasn't worthy. I didn't feel worthy and I didn't love myself. And so she was like, okay, if that doesn't feel true, then okay, you know your mom loves you, right? You know your boyfriend loves you, you know your best friend loves you. It's kind of like whatever you can attach to that, and then we'll work on the self-worth and we'll work on loving yourself when we can. But when you're in that crisis state, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, we'll latch on to anything positive that we can. I'm not sure if you can relate to that or if you have something similar.
Yeah. Oh yeah, actually, one thing that I took away from my therapist that was it kind of changed my perspective on a lot of things, and I don't always practice it because it's like you kind of have to rebrain your a little bit, but I
Yes.
like started out with like, so I would like punish myself because I had a bad day and I thought I said something stupid. It was all irrational, whatever. Whatever
Yes.
I was telling myself I did wrong
Yeah.
that day and was punishing myself. Then my therapist would be like, well, if your best friend made that mistake, would you say they couldn't eat dinner because of that? And I
Mm-hmm.
realized, like, I knew what I was doing was irrational, but I also knew I would tell my best friend that she needs to eat and that she shouldn't be punishing herself for this dumb mistake because everyone makes mistakes. And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of was like, it just kind of points out how irrational your thoughts are, but also how like you should be treating yourself. And eventually it kind
Yes.
of evolved into me pretending that I'm dating myself in a way where
Yeah.
if I
That's a
say
great
something
way
mean
to
to
think about
myself,
it.
oh my God, it literally is so life changing. Like if I say something mean to myself or I'm like, you're so stupid, you did this. And then I'll like literally like put myself in like girlfriend mode and like defend myself. And like,
Yeah.
and it doesn't always work because I'm not always like diligent about it, but I try to
Yeah.
like catch myself and like, how are you feeling? Are you okay? Are you hungry? And then I'll like make myself something. Like I try
Mm-hmm.
to talk to my inner self like I'm my own girlfriend. And
Yes.
it's kind of like, it's a good tactic while you're working on your self-worth and just like other, things that you're struggling with. But I felt like, why shouldn't we be treating ourselves like how we treat the people we date? Because I feel like I would treat myself like shit, but I would treat everyone else like they were the freaking queen of the castle or king of the castle. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that was really helpful. And Soarsha, what you were saying about like writing notes on like the small things you can achieve throughout the day when you're in a crisis, one thing on TikTok I saw that I thought was like such a good idea is that I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it a lot of times when I get super depressed, I can't leave my bed, and everything feels like the hardest thing in the world. So, which it is basically what you were saying before. But one girl was like showing that she has a depression box next to her bed, and it's like it could be filled with a water bottle or like food or a snack that you could eat, or like things that make her happy, or like something you can jot down notes in, just like things to kind of like either take care of yourself or distract yourself,
Right.
or things that just like make you happy in the moment. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, that's like such a good idea because
Yes.
it's really so hard to even like go to the bathroom, let alone like have a
Yep.
snack. So, and I like the irrational shit I thought when I wouldn't eat when I was in that state, like eating just like changes everything. Like it makes you like so much more able to kind of like push yourself out of something. So
Yeah.
it's like those like immediate things can like do such like help in the moment. And taking a walk,
Yes.
like I hate to like force myself to take a walk, but it does
Absolutely.
really get
And
yourself like calm down for a sec.
mm-hmm. It's something so true. I think that my third therapist was um my third therapist was great in her own way because she was more of my crisis therapist. I was really in a deep depression and like crisis state. I hadn't come out yet, so I think there was a lot of repressed stuff. I think that fed into that. We can touch on that in a second. But anyways, I'll just say is that like, she was really great with this like crisis tips. And I remember her saying to me once that it's so helpful when you can get to yourself out of your own head. And that's good with anxiety management too, is you can get so in your own head when you go on those like
Yeah.
depression like thought spirals or like anxiety spirals, where it's like if you do something physical, like take a shower, go for a walk, eat something, you are bringing yourself physically back into your body. And that creates sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes enough of a separation where you can stop that spiral. And sometimes that's all you need, right? Like when that spiral is spiraling, like it is like a vacuum. It just sucks you down. And
For
so
sure.
anything you can do to like stop that from happening, or at least put a pause on it, the relief from that can be great.
Yeah, oh my God, such great advice. I'm glad that we really got into that, but we're kind of getting close on time, and I wanted to do my last segment with you. But before we go ahead in that, is there anything else you wanted to add about, healing and mental health before we move on to our Found on Reddit segment?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love the Found on Reddit segment. This might be cliche, okay, but bear with me.
I'm ready.
It's oh my gosh. Oh, you can cut all that out. Stuttering. You're not alone. And as much as your brain is going to try to tell you that you're alone, you're not. I promise you, you are not. And I know I kind of crapped and shit on like the internet a little earlier and was like, I miss having a physical community. Like, to be real though, just connecting with people online, following accounts or whatever was sometimes enough to fill that void and make me not feel alone. Following other people who are struggling with anxiety or struggling with depression, or other women who came out as bi or gay or whatever after they were married, I realized like, oh, I am not alone. There is a whole lot of other people that have gone through this. Like, y'all, there's 8 billion people on this planet. You're not alone. And I say that with so much love and compassion for what everybody's individual experience is, right? Like, I've never lived your life. You never lived mine, right? But there's certain things that we have in common that we can relate with. And that's where the like, you're not alone comes from. I know that gets tossed around all the time, and it can get so cliche. Like, yeah, you're not alone. But it's true.
We all need the reminder. I mean, celebrities get depressed. Everyone gets depressed. Well, I mean, for the people who don't, I am so happy for you, and I envy you a lot.
Yeah.
But most people have experience some kind of like form of anxiety and depression, or other related things. So
right.
And it's okay to not be okay. I mean, it happens to us all, and like there's always someone there to help. That like this moment will pass. Like I feel like when I'm in like a spiral moment, I need to remind myself like this moment will pass, and then I ask myself, will this matter in 5 years? Most of the time it doesn't. I mean, there's obviously cases where it does matter in 5 years, of course, or you're going through something that's very tough and everything you're going through is valid, but sometimes it's not going to matter in 5 years, and sometimes I need to remind myself that. So I don't know if that resonates with anyone, but all right. On to hopefully something a little bit lighter, but so Found on Reddit. As you know, I love Reddit. Reddit was a big part of my coming out journey. That was kind of how I found community and like met I didn't really meet anyone, but talked to other people who were going through the same thing as me. And I honestly, I swear to God, people write the same posts all the time, and I love hearing it. But I feel like we need to like talk about it on the show. So I found one actually today that I was like, I don't know if this will necessarily relate to you, but I think that you'll have enough to say about it that I needed to share. So it's called, Why Do Lesbians Always Ask When You Last Had Sex with a Man?
Oh.
I'm about to like call out some exes on this one.
Hell yeah.
I've been talking to this woman. Everything's been good until she dropped this question. I have been asked this every time I've been in the talking stage with a woman. It actually gives me the ick. What is the reason? What information are they looking for exactly? Someone please enlighten me. So the reason is probably biphobia. Probably that they can't fathom the fact that you've once had intercourse with a man, and also the person who said it to me had a husband before, so it's like there's just some weird inner shit going on that they're projecting on you and your bisexual self. So that's my initial thought to that, but like that was literally like one of my big experiences when I went on dating apps. But yeah, a lot of people would ask me like, oh, but you've been with men, or like, are you ever gonna date a man again? And it's like it doesn't matter, a person is a person. Like
yeah.
I
100%. Oh my gosh, my mind is teeming with things to respond with. Oh my gosh. Okay. I think the most frustrating thing about that is the biphobia coming from within the community
mhm.
is
Yeah.
so disheartening, because it's one thing, like, okay, I live in the South, right? And I'm a gay woman living in the South, or queer woman living in the South. I'm gonna expect to not be accepted. I'm gonna expect to like be treated poorly and talked down on all that, right? But there's something that
Mhm.
just like twists the knife a little bit deeper when it comes from home, right? If we consider like LGBT
Yeah.
community like home base, right, for this analogy, when it's coming from inside the home, it hurts a little bit deeper, right? Like,
It
because it,
does. It does. And like it makes you feel less valid in a way.
mm-hmm.
It's just
I
it's
feel
hard
like
because I
those are
know
the,
that. Sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go.
Oh, I was the lag is really hard sometimes, but I was gonna say that it's like I know that a lot of like lesbians and gay men have experienced a lot more discrimination, or they haven't been able to be in hetero relationships to
Yep.
kind of fit into the the straight culture in a sense, but it's also really hard and invalidating to be on the other end of that as a bisexual person. So it's like I
Yes.
kind of struggle with it because I think, again, like, yes, I accept that there are so many privileges when you're able to be in a heterosexual relationship, but it's also you I'm sure you go with the same things, especially
Yes.
as being married to a man, but
Yes.
it does hurt a lot more
100%.
coming from the queer community.
Yeah. And I remember watching a oh my gosh, something just came back to me. I remember scrolling through TikTok, and you know how randomly like lives will pop up that of people you don't follow? Okay, so like a live had popped up and it was like an LGBT friendly one. And I was like, okay, I'll pop in, I'll see what's going on. And like they were talking about I think it was two lesbian women talking about just like being queer and all that, blah blah blah. And I had made a comment of like whatever. I had made a comment about something. Like I had just said something like, "Oh, like I just don't feel like I'm like gay enough to like be in the gay spaces as like a bi woman or something." And then they responded and they were like, "Well, what's ever happened to you? Like have you ever been kicked out of these places? Like have you ever like have you actually ever had a bad experience, or is it all in your head?" And then that made me like get inside my own head and be like, "Oh my god, is it in my own head? Like it's da 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 da," and like question myself. But then it's these kinds of experiences, and if you'll accept the expression of like a microaggression almost from like within the community or like of the microaggression being like the biphobia to be like, oh, have you slept with a man before, is like asking if you're like a pure bi woman, or like, or I'm sure it happens with lesbians when they talk to each other like isn't there something that's like called like a 5-star lesbian, right,
Oh,
or something like
yeah,
that?
gold star lesbian,
Yeah,
yeah, and
thank
it's
you.
like,
Yeah,
come
yeah.
on.
Yeah, like I feel like those are the types of things, like these types of questions, like this Reddit post is what makes
Mm.
me feel not fully at home in the queer community sometimes. These are the
Yeah.
things like, no, like maybe if I walked into a gay bar, I wouldn't be like kicked out. But I also think that if I were to walk into the gay bar as a bi woman, wanting to like be around other queer people with my husband in a hetero facing relationship, I would be getting dirty looks. I would presume that I would be getting dirty looks. And the
For sure.
presumption that I'm not going to be accepted keeps me out of those spaces. And I feel like that's what contributes, like it's like a negative cycle for me. I can't speak for everybody, but like for me, that keeps me out of queer spaces, because I know that if I show up with my husband who I love, I just I feel like it's not going to be this like the same kind of acceptance as if my husband was a woman and I walked into a gay bar.
Yeah. And it's just so tough. I feel like it's such a relatable feeling. And I mean, it's not like your husband is being an asshole in queer spaces either,
Right.
but but we
Yeah.
are running close on time according to
I know.
my recorder. I've got 3 minutes left before it stops
Oh
recording.
no.
I've got to upgrade to premium. But Soarsha, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such a really
Yes.
meaningful conversation, and I've learned so much from you, and I hope that, listeners really get a lot out of it. But where can people follow you? Do you have anything that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, please follow me on Instagram at Soarsha. It's SOARSHAA. And then same thing, follow me on YouTube as well. I post vlogs. A lot of it's like motivational content and things like that. Not like motivational speaking. Like I do like fun vlogs about like trying to get fit. I have this dream this year to like get in my dream body. I used to be an athlete. And I know other people out there gained that COVID 30. I did too. So I'm trying to get back to where I just feel like strong and healthy again. And so that's what a lot of my vlogs are, like funny things of me trying to get back into shape and stuff like that. So I'd love it if you guys would check that out.
Yay! I'll put it in the show notes, but that all sounds so fun. But thank you again, and we'll have to talk soon.
Yes, thank you so much, Talia, for having me on. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yay!
Thank you so much to Soarsha for joining. I always love talking to listeners who have a really interesting story and they're just really passionate. And Soarsha was somebody that I really connected with really easily. As you can tell in the conversation, it just felt like, it was friends talking. So it was really fun to talk to her. So one thing I mentioned is that I did a little fact checking after recording this episode, and we talk a lot about how bisexual people are at the highest rates of things like suicide, depression, substance abuse. So I pulled some stats from the Human Rights Campaign and the LGBTQ Task Force. So just a couple that stuck out to me. 40% of bisexual people have considered or attempted suicide compared to over a quarter of gay men and lesbians. And of course, those rates are much higher for bisexual or queer trans individuals and people of color. Bisexual women are twice as likely to have an eating disorder than lesbians. So, that's something that we talked about as well, experiencing disordered eating and how that affected our lives. Bi men and women have the highest rates of substance abuse. Again, a lot of these stats are nothing that's surprising. We talked about the many reasons for why bisexuals are always, at the highest of all these rates compared to other LGBT groups or our straight counterparts. And I mentioned that, we're a really vast community and a lot of us have different experiences, whether that be we're marginalized or we share different intersections outside of just being queer. Or that could be economic disparities. Financial situations have an impact on our mental health as well. But I think overall, these stats are really proving that biphobia is way more harmful and prevalent than we ever thought. It's important to note that gay men, lesbians, other people within the LGBTQ community face a lot of discrimination. But that's not to say that bisexual people also have a part in the conversation to talk about how biphobia impacts their mental health in day-to-day. Because at the end of the day, there are people who are experiencing much worse discrimination. Maybe they're bisexual, maybe they're not. I think it's really important to listen to other people's stories to see, how that impacts other people and how we can work together to spread awareness, but also amplify each other and support each other. So I hope that this was really informative and helpful and relatable. Again, some mental health is something that I've experienced and dealt with my whole life, and it's just really nice and confirming to hear from other people, what they've experienced. But thank you again for listening. We're actually entering on Pride Month shortly. I had my episode come out a little bit early this month, not only for Mental Health Awareness Month, but because I'm going on vacation. I get to visit my sister in Seattle, and I'm pumped. But that means that I am giving you a Pride Month episode a little bit later than normal. But I'm so excited for the next guest. Something that a lot of listeners have mentioned is that they really want to hear from more bi male guests. And I'm listening. That's something that's really important to me, is not only listening to your feedback, but having a more diverse range of bi people, whether that be cis men, non-cis individuals, different communities. I'm just really open to having all different types of guests. And since I only have monthly episodes, it's really hard to go through more guests as quickly as possible. So trust me that I'm working on it. It feels like it's coming out slow, but I have so many great guests on the horizon, and I'm so excited to share with you. So on that note, please, please, please continue to give us feedback. You can do so by giving a rating and review directly on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Reviews are really, really helpful for getting bisexual behavior up on the algorithm. So I would really love that. But also subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and give us a rating. A rating also helps. You can also email us directly at bisexualbehavior@gmail.com. And give us a follow on social media. On Instagram, it's at bisexualbehavior. You can also follow me at talia.tatiana. And I'm also on TikTok. I'm not doing much on TikTok. I'm really trying. But thank you all for listening, for your support and feedback. I'm so excited to celebrate Pride Month with you all from Seattle. But until then, okay, bye.